The first thing is read the question in its entirety, and then read it a second time, highlighting or underlining all the key pieces of information. Okay? And then a third time. Now, this might take you a minute. That's worth it. It's worth spending a good minute reading carefully and making sure you understand what the question's asking for. Now, on the third reading, you can start putting your thoughts down on paper. So, don't read it and think sort of without writing things down. Okay? Putting your thought processes on paper allows your thinking to develop in a very logical way. Now, we're ready to start. And there'll always be a starting point. There'll always be an easy 1 mark to start with. And that easy 1 mark, often you get simply by putting your thoughts down on paper. It might be writing the equation. It might be working out the moles of whatever thing you can work out the mole for. And once you've written it down, you begin to see how that answer you've written down links to the next answer. Because all difficult exam questions have got parts to them which sort of link to each other. And there's a theme going on through the different parts of the question. And the difficulty often is when you have to do all of the thinking and linking yourself and it isn't broken down for you. Okay, so you've got your thought processes written down maybe in the margin. You now want to set out your working clearly. So if it's an essay type question, your thought processes, in other words, how you're going to structure your answer. You've done a little outline. What are the parts of the question? How many points am I going to write for each of those parts? If it's a calculation, you've gone, right, I need to work out the moles. I've got an equation here. Do I need to think about the molar ratio? What's the limiting reactant? So making all of those little bullet points in the margin. And then you have to write down your answer. Now, this might sound really obvious, but you need to put down your answer in as clear a way as possible so that the marker, remember this is a very difficult question and not many people are going to get to the final answer. What the marker is doing is usually looking at the final answer, and if it's right, you just get all of the marks if it's a calculation, for example. So if you haven't got the right final answer, they need to then work through all of your answer to pick out the marking points and give you marks and give you credit for your effort. If your effort is sort of all over the shop, you haven't sort of set out your working in a logical way, it can be difficult for the examiner to see where your answers are and where to give you credit. So as far as setting out your work clearly, it starts with using as much of the available space as possible. Don't waste any of the space. For really long answers, you'll usually get a whole page or maybe 2 sides of A4 lined to do your calculations or to write your essay type answer. Excuse me. So use up all the space. Don't squeeze your working into a tiny little corner of the page. Now, once you've done that, you may well see that you've worked through sort of half of the question and are confident, and you've got another half to go through and you're not so sure about the next sort of quarter of the way through, and the very final part you just don't have a clue at all. Making a very good effort at reaching maybe sort of 3/4 of the mark available. So if it's a 6 marker and you've got maybe 4 or 5 marks out of 6, that is an impressive effort, and you shouldn't leave the exam room thinking, oh my god, I didn't get the final answer, panic, game over, I'm not going to get my A star. That's not true. Think about it. The A star is at about 80%, sort of a minimum of 80% of the total marks available. If on this really hard question, right, you've got even 50% of the marks, and you've made up marks everywhere else by scoring 90%, scoring 85%. Some of you are mathematicians, but you don't even need to be a mathematician to work out that all of those questions that came before that you've done really well on will make up for the fact that on this one question you've got 50%, 60% or 70% of the marks on. The important thing is not to panic and therefore not answer the question at all. That is the worst case scenario. Okay, so how do we get to that final question and not be panicked by not having enough time? Because that is the key cause of panic. Do all the other questions that you're comfortable on, that you've always maximized your marks on. Do that, and then you'll have lots of time. You'll have lots of time at the end to do that really difficult question. So good exam technique, setting out your working neatly so that it's very clear where your marking points are if you don't have that final answer, I think are really important.